achieved.
So we've had some interesting developments in the UFC's bantamweight division. The two-time champion and current champion, former champion as of right now, TJ Dillashaw, has relinquished his title as the result of adverse findings connected to his USADA drug tests leading up to the Henry Cejudo flyweight championship fight. Again, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but that's what I've gleaned from the situation. Now, he seems very apologetic. He's come out and said, I don't want to hold the division up while they're trying to figure out what's going on. It leads me to believe he might know something more than he's letting on, and they're trying to get out in front of it. Maybe I'm wrong, but we've seen it before. But as of right now, the bantamweight division has no champion. Now, there's a couple different directions the UFC could go. This is the one I think they're going to go, and it's the one I don't want to see happen. They could, initially they were looking at potentially using TJ Dillashaw to defeat Henry Cejudo, unify the flyweight and bantamweight titles, and destroy the flyweight and finish the flyweight division off. Now, what they could do is say, Henry Cejudo, you just beat the bantamweight champion. You're the flyweight champion. We are going to put you in a bantamweight title fight. And if he happens to win that championship and becomes the new bantamweight champion, then the flyweight division, poof, disappears. The scraps or the other fighters that are worth looking at get a chance to go up and fight at 135 pounds, and they get rid of the 125-pound division. Now, facing Henry Cejudo, my expectation would be Marlon Moraes would get that opportunity. I would much rather see, looking at the rankings right now, Marlon Moraes has definitively defeated Rafael Assunção and Aljamain Sterling, the number 2 and 3 ranked guys in the division. The one guy that's on a roll and coming off a big win is Pedro Munoz. Munoz just defeated Cody Garbrandt. So the direction I would like to see, Marlon Moraes take on Cody Garbrandt. Take on Pedro Munoz to crown a new bantamweight champion. I think that would be a fantastic and worthwhile fight. I think that makes a lot of sense. Then after that, you go, okay, so what do we do next? You look at the list of guys. Assunção's coming off the definitive loss to Moraes. Dominic Cruz is inactive. Cody Garbrandt just got smashed. Jimmy Rivera has lost to Moraes as well. John Lineker is got a big fight coming up. Peter Yan certainly building a lot of momentum. I would think that probably Moraes and Munoz face off, with the winner of that facing Aljamain Sterling for the title. After that, I don't know. We'll see how the UFC comes out of this situation and what they decide to do. My anticipation is they love, and we see it with Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier, they love champion versus champion style bouts, and moving Henry Cejudo up into for a shot at the bantamweight title checks off a number of boxes. It would be unfortunate, but I think that's what they're going to do. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. In this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 148, which will take place in Nashville, Tennessee on March 23rd. There are 6 main card fights, which I'll be giving you my predictions for in this episode of the show. There are 6 prelims. Last time I checked, still 6 prelims, which I will be breaking down for you on my website, kamikazeoverdrive.net. Now, I'm coming off another one of those shows. It just was not a good show. I went 6-6. Now, I was 6-4 going to the final 2 fights, and again, both of them ended with the wrong outcome. Very unfortunate. And one thing, I'm struggling in 2019. I've only had one good event, which was fantastic. I'm not putting enough of it together. But it's worth noting, and a couple of those scenarios that popped up in the last show that are worth talking about. The big one being the post-title fight letdown scenario. Darren Till is coming off losing to Tyron Woodley for the welterweight championship, and more often than not always, but we see that fighter who loses that opportunity to win with the title also loses their next fight out. And again, I've talked at nauseum about how there's just that lack of drive, that lack of focus. Suddenly you've reached the top, the climax of your potential career, or at least up until that point, and you've been knocked right back down again. And it's hard to refocus, especially when you're facing an opponent who's in a different mindset, who hasn't had their opportunity, feels knocking you off gets them one step closer, and that's what we saw there. So again, that's a scenario we need to build on. I made the mistake of backing Darren Till. He looked good in the first round. Masvidal is an animal, and I hope he gets himself a title shot based on this, or should be much closer. The other one, which I haven't paid as much attention to, is the Mark Diakase fight. Is that fighters who are on 3-fight losing streaks come in as heavy underdogs a lot of the time and then tend to pull it out. And I think it's because people look at those 3-fight losing streaks and they say, that fighter's down and out. They can't win a fight to save their life. They're still a good fighter, and losing 4 is a big deal. And I'm not saying it's a foregone conclusion that they're not going to lose that 4th consecutive fight. But again, they come in with it's a kill or be killed mindset, desperation, all those things. And I think it certainly plays a role in the odds and how they're portrayed as an underdog. and Deiveson put a great fight together against Joe Duffy and picked up a nice win again. I picked against Mark, and that was a mistake on my part. But yeah, at this point, we're going to see if we can turn things around here. I've been saying that for a little bit now, and we'll try and get 2019 going at some point. The bet packs are for sale, $15, or you can subscribe and save yourself some cash. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. I've been rambling quite a bit in this intro, and I think it's time we get to our first main card prediction. The opening fight of the main card transpires in the women's strawweight division as Maycee, the future Barber, undefeated at 6-0, takes on the 7-2 JJ Aldrich. Now, Aldrich comes into this matchup having won 3 consecutive fights since a debut loss to Juliana Lima. She has a trio of decision victories, including an upset of Polyana Viana in her most recent appearance. For Barber, she won her contenders bout via TKO and then got the call to the UFC, where she soundly beat Hannah Cifers by TKO and has finished 5 of her 6 pro victories. Both girls are 5'5". Aldrich does have a 2-inch reach advantage, and Barber is just 20 years old, which is crazy. Aldrich is 26. She's not old by any stretch of the imagination, but Barber just 20, very, very young. And this actually kind of is the finals of a mini tournament that's kind of been going on. A lot of people don't realize this. I like to pair these things together. We saw Barber beat Cifers and Aldrich beat Viana to advance to this fight. Cifers just fought Polyana Viana and defeated her via an upset in what we consider like the bronze medal. Now we have the finals of this little 4-person tournament, and the winner obviously gets to make that next step into relevance. Now, this fight will most likely be decided by who can force their opponent to compete outside their desired range. For Barber, she showcased a very mauling clinch and cage-based attack in both of her last 2 fights. Pardon me. She kept Hannah Cifers her back to the cage. She really limited her space. She hung and wore on her and just dragged her down and was very active from the position. She did a lot of damage against Cifers at short range and really simply overwhelmed her. Eventually, she did get her down, and that's what the finish transpired with strikes. Now, akin to that type of approach, her last 3 stoppages have all come outside of the first round, including 2 in the 3rd round, where she's able to just pile up the damage and break her adversary. Now, for Aldrich, she wants to work at range, wants to work from distance. She works a decent volume attack, and she stays relatively mobile. She is not going to want to allow Barber to get her hands on her. Now, she's not going to smoke her opponent, overwhelm her with big offense. She's just not a big power puncher, but she's just going to stay a little bit more active. Now, when you look at a key difference between when she fought Lima in her debut versus when she fought Viana in her last fight was takedown defense. Juliana Lima took her down in 4 of her 6 fights and kept Aldrich on the mat. Viana just went 1 for 5 and allowed Aldrich to stay vertical and work her striking game. Aldrich has struggled against opponents that will try and put her on the mat, but she appears to have cleaned up her takedown defense in recent outings. Now, the key difference here is that Barber doesn't need takedowns to win this fight. She can stay vertical and work from that clinch position and have success. Barber landed strikes at distance in her last fight, including a pretty solid head kick, and those back leg kicks will be open against Aldrich to southpaw and vice versa. But her offense normally carries her forward into the clinch, which is where Aldrich needs to circle out and avoid that position. Ultimately, JJ doesn't have the power to back Maycee up, doesn't have the volume to keep her on the defensive. Barber is the more physical girl. She will push forward, she will close down on Aldrich, and she's going to hammer her in that clinch position. Aldrich might be able to stay vertical in this fight, but she won't be able to defend the clinch attacks. She only wins this matchup if she maintains separation for like 75% of the fight. I think Barber's going to press forward early. She's going to overwhelm her, and my prediction is Maycee Barber to defeat JJ Aldrich by TKO. In the UFC's featherweight division, violent Bob Ross Luis Pena returns to action with a record of 5-1, taking on the 17-7 Steven Ocho Peterson. Now, Peterson's coming off his first UFC victory, a split decision against Matt Bessette. He lost his debut against Brandon Davis, also lost in the Contender Series in a split decision to Benito Lopez, went back in the regional circuit, picked up a win, and got the call here. Or got the call to the UFC, and now is making his 3rd appearance. For Pena, he won his debut. He was a member of the Ultimate Fighter, but dropped a split decision against Michael Trezano. He's one of those fighters who had to bow out of the tournament before he was eliminated, but losing to Michael Trezano in a very not very controversial, but at least objectionable split decision. It's a little bit upsetting. Physically, Pena is 6'3". That is unreal for a featherweight. He's incredibly tall. He's 5 inches taller than Peterson, who's not a short man by any stretch of the imagination. He will also have a sizable 6-inch reach advantage, and he is the younger fighter by 3 years. Now, looking at Peterson first, he is very aggressive. super aggressive. He moves forward, he's willing to eat offense to deliver his own, and that approach can work, but to a degree at this level. Now, he landed, and this is the perfect example, he landed 70 significant strikes in both of his UFC fights. The difference was, when he fought Brandon Davis, Davis landed more. He capitalized on the willingness of Peterson to move forward, wasn't swayed by it, wasn't pushed back, and won the fight as a result. Bessette didn't have that fortune. Davis landed 114 significant strikes, while Bessette only landed 57. So while Peterson's putting the same output in both fights, it's not having the same impact. Now, we also saw Peterson have some success with his takedowns in that fight, which was a very crucial aspect of his success against Bessette. Now, Peterson, he will slow down in fights. He will wear damage. He doesn't have a great record in decisions, which again is indicative of a fighter who fights like this. He's 5-6 overall, including a 1-2 record in split decisions, so that's worth looking at. But again, he likes to press forward behind punches. He will clinch. He will look for takedowns. He does have 8 wins by submission. He had some success getting Bessette's back at key points in rounds 2 and 3, and that's certainly something he's going to look for here. Now, looking at Pena, 4 of his 5 total wins have come by submission. He's very good on the mat. He's got long limbs, which makes him incredibly dangerous. Now, it's worth noting over his 2 UFC fights, which consists of only 4 rounds a little over 4 rounds of action, he's been taken down 3 times. Now, again, he's willing to take off his back, attack off his back. He can tie his opponents up, but he needs to be mindful of giving up position and relinquishing position simply to go to work. And again, I've talked about Louis Smolka in the past being a suicide grappler, and Pena has some of those characteristics. You know, if he can get on top, look out, you are in serious trouble. But if you get on top of him and can nullify some of his offense off his back, he is not in a good spot. Now, when he fought Trezano, he looked to take Trezano's back standing. He had success, but eventually he lost the position. He accepted a bad spot and he worked out of it, but still, you don't want to be doing that too frequently. He will shoot for a takedown. He'll combine it with a trip because he has those long legs. He can pull it off. He hasn't had a lot of success with wrestling. He will look for body lock takedowns as well. It's something he can go to, and if he can improve that, look out. That's going to make for a dangerous combination. Now, his striking, lots of offensive striking flow. Doesn't throw big power to the strikes, but he keeps engaging. And he's similar to Pearson in the fact that he will take damage to land damage. He's finished all his fights except his last, which turns out he's only lost. Again, indicative of a fighter who's willing to mix it up. Ultimately, I think Peterson's going to struggle with the height and reach of Pena. Unless he lands a one-hitter quitter and puts him down, he's going to have issues there. He's going to be hit routinely before he can get in range to land anything. Now, he could find success with on the mat by landing takedowns, but again, if Pena is active off his back and makes it a dangerous proposition for Peterson to go to the floor, and it becomes a negative gain, it becomes something he's not going to want to do. It takes away one of his key elements. Ultimately, I think Pena's going to do more damage on the feet. He possibly is going to hurt him. He could attack, again, he'll attack off his back if taken down. I prefer not to see that too often, but I think Pena's going to hurt him, get himself in a good spot on the mat, and my prediction is Luis Pena to defeat Steven Peterson by submission. Now, this is a fight that ultimately, if the flyweight division perpetuates and continues forward, the winner of this matchup should get a shot at the title. And looking at these two guys on UFC.com, there's a lot of similarities. What we have is the #1 ranked fighter in the division, Jussier Formiga, 22-5-0, battling the 4th ranked fellow Brazilian, Deiveson, I'm probably butchering that, Figueiredo. I love that name, Figueiredo. Now this, like I said, is a #1 contenders fight for the flyweight division. Hopefully they start to reinvest in this division. I don't want to see them let it go. There's some good fighters in the division. I want to see things perpetuate and move forward. Now, Formiga has been at or near the top of this division, both in the UFC and outside of the UFC before it existed, for a long time, but he is one of the few big-name fighters who have never got a shot at the title. He comes into this fight having won 3 in a row, including wins over Sergio Pettis and Ben Nguyen, which, if he can add Figueiredo to that resume, it's going to put him in a position to challenge for the title. Now, Figueiredo, so far undefeated in the UFC, 4-0. With 3 TKO victories, which is not common in the flyweight division. It's something people are going to look at. And again, he's undefeated overall as well, so he certainly can be pushed as a viable challenger with a win here. Both guys are 5'5", 1 inch reach advantage for Figueiredo, who's actually the younger fighter by 2 years. Now, Formiga overall 8-4 in the UFC. This is his second 3-fight winning streak, so he's had success before, but he has had multiple failed attempts to secure a shot at the title, and he's been given multiple opportunities to do so. He lost to John Dodson in his debut. He lost to Joseph Benavidez in a fairly big fight. He lost to Henry Cejudo, the current champion. I believe that was by split decision. And he lost to Ray Borg. And now the commonality with all of these fights is that all 4 individuals went on to fight for the championship in their very next fight. So ultimately beating Formiga was that stepping stone each one of them required to get to that title shot. Is Figueiredo next, or do we finally get to see Formiga get an opportunity to challenge for the title? Now, we know Formiga is a BJJ black belt and incredibly talented on the mat. Figueiredo is a black belt as well. Now, there are black belts and there are black belts, and I would rank Formiga above Figueiredo overall. But hey, Figueiredo's got 5 wins by submission, and he's showed he can compete on the mat, but ultimately he's going to want to keep this fight standing because he has lots of power. He has relied on his ground game, but it's a secondary attack. Against John Moraga, he put him on his back a couple of times, had a couple of takedowns in 3 different fights. He's landed 2 takedowns on 3 different occasions. He's got a heavy top game, good ground and pound. He is looking for ground and pound in the UFC. He's not looking for submissions. Now, the big question is here, does he want to risk dealing with Formiga on the mat? Does one failed takedown attempt result in Formiga getting an advantageous position and finishing this fight? For Jussier, he's landed 17 takedowns in 8 UFC fights. At least 1 fight per takedown. Those are his wins, 8 UFC wins, sorry. At least 1 fight per takedown in 6 of those 8 fights, I believe. Conversely, in his 4 UFC losses, not surprisingly, no takedowns completed. So there seems to be a secret to success there is keep Formiga standing. Now, Figueiredo, when you go back to his controversial split decision win over Will Brooks, he gave up 7 takedowns. Now, that was back in 2016, 2017. Has his takedown defense improved? He hasn't really faced a really strong ground fighter wrestler yet, but we'll see if that's, and who's tested it, we'll see if that is the case here. Now, Formiga's got a very good single leg. He does a good job of getting his opponent off balance, which is a guy, if you don't have that great blast double, that big power, this is a much better technique for you. He has a smothering top game, excellent back take. He is lethal from that position and looks for rear naked chokes. Now, he doesn't land a lot of takedowns, but a lot of the times that's because he is so difficult to get out from under. So if he takes you down, you're potentially there for the round. If he doesn't finish you, you're going to spend the entire round there. And the guy's like, 3 takedowns per fight, who cares? He won a decision because he landed 1 per round and kept you on your back. When he fought Sergio Pettis, a fight I correctly predicted, Pettis was able to force him to stand at periods in that fight, but Formiga had some success putting him down as well. It was kind of one of those mixed bags. And Formiga can hold his own on the feet. He's improved his striking significantly from where he started out, but again, that's not a place. Just like Figueiredo doesn't want to mess around with Formiga on the feet, or on the mat, Figueiredo has a sizable advantage over Jussier on the mat and will not want to go there. Ultimately, Figueiredo can't afford to be on his back. He can hang from top position. I think that's something he might test out, but again, why risk it? Formiga, again, he can hold his own on his feet, but he's going to get himself in trouble. And Figueiredo, for my money, hits way too hard. Ultimately, I think Figueiredo is going to struggle with the physicality. Formiga, sorry, is going to struggle with the physicality of Figueiredo. It's going to tire him. He's going to tire himself out trying to get the fight to the floor. Figueiredo will find success on the feet, back him up, work the body. He's going to use a lot of that head movement to draw out Formiga's shots. I think he'll draw Formiga into a striking exchange, lull him into a type of fight that he doesn't want to be in. And my prediction is Deiveson Figueiredo to defeat Jussier Formiga by TKO. In the UFC's lightweight division, Canadian John the Bull Makdessi, 16-6-0, battles Peruvian Jesus El Mundo Pinedo in an interesting fight that really came about simply because 2 of the original fights were scrapped. Nasrat Hakparas and Chris Grutzmeyer were involved in matchups that involved these 2 fighters. Both of them pulled out, and the UFC, instead of finding individual replacements, just paired them together, and now we have this fight. Now, Makdessi had a 1-3 stretch over 4 fights that really had people questioning whether he was going to stick with the UFC. He has since won 2 straight and got himself back on track. Overall, he's fought 15 times in the octagon, winning 9 of those fights. For Pinedo, he took a decision in his debut against Devin Powell to extend his current winning streak to 7 fights. And now he took that fight on short notice, fighting in Argentina, now moving stateside for this appearance. Pinedo is 2 inches taller than Makdessi and will have a sizable 6-inch reach advantage. 2 to 4 inches taller, because some reports have him at 6 feet tall, others have him at 5'10". So it's worth noting he's also 11 years younger than the Bull. Now, this is a pairing of a very explosive, aggressive, and young striker in Pinedo against a battle-tested veteran striker in Makdessi. Pinedo has won 7 fights by knockout, with 11 finishes overall, and 9 of those coming in the opening round. In his debut, he started off strong, but slowed down a little bit. Again, that can be attributed to the debut factor, to the short notice factor. He also benefited from his opponent slowing down a bit, so that kept things from getting too out of hand. Ultimately, he won the fight. One of the things that was worth looking at in that matchup, which was really quite odd, is that whether through Pinedo's offense or Powell's just struggle with body control, he was able to get his opponent on his back on several occasions, actually looking for takedowns. And that really benefited him in the overall appearance, and I don't know if that's going to be a factor here or not. We wouldn't see him commit to his top game. He stood over him, held that superior position, but really wouldn't get on top and didn't do a heck of a lot once he had the opportunity. He had some issues with the pressure of Powell in the fight and was backing up at times, but then he would spring forward and land some pretty decent shots and use his kicks to maintain distance in that matchup. Now, when you look at Makdessi, he's had some trouble. The thing that stands out about John Makdessi is that he's had trouble in decisions, close ones. He has won a couple in a row recently, but he's one of these fighters who just has issues with the judges. He has a very unorthodox striking style. He's a purist in a sense. He draws upon a number of combat accreditations, including karate and taekwondo. He uses that sideways stance with a lot of lead leg techniques. He's a very methodical fighter. He at times appears to lack urgency, which again gets him in trouble in those decisions. He's willing to step back and counter, move backwards, try and strike backwards. That doesn't always weigh well with the judges. Now, he's at his best when he can time his opponents and counter them as they move in. And he has a decent work rate, and that's something too, which is actually you don't see that about him. Despite his lack of urgency, he works at a very steady, consistent output. He has landed more strikes in 13 of his 16 UFC fights, 14 of 16 UFC fights overall, but still has struggled with decisions. He's got a very good left jab. He pops his opponent with it, and the combination of that jab and just those spearing leg techniques with limited windup really shuts down his opponent's offense, keeps them from pressing forward and getting into range. Now, Makdessi has had issues with longer, rangier strikers or fighters that can blend together their takedowns, and Pinedo didn't show a lot of success in the mat in his last fight. He does have some submissions win on his record. I don't know if he'll find himself in a position to use that here, but he is a longer, rangier fighter, and that could be an issue for Makdessi. It's also worth noting Makdessi's been knocked out twice, so a career of being a hard-charging striker, a type of guy who's willing to trade on the feet, it can catch up with you. Pinedo's been knocked out twice as well, so that's also worth noting. Does the fact that we've had this last-second opponent change affect either man? For Pinedo, he might just go in there and fight. For Makdessi, he might have been game planning, but again, he's a veteran fighter who's seen a lot of things in his career. It might not impact him. I think we're going to see Pinedo come out and have a much better performance this time around than he did in his debut. He's got a full camp. The debut's behind him. He should be in a better place. He needs to use a lot of movement here and get past Makdessi's offense. Mix things up, vary things, use his reach. Makdessi is too passive, I think. I think that's going to be an issue here. His wins have come against Abel Trujillo and Ross Pearson, good fighters, but guys who are certainly not at the top of their game. For Pinedo, I think it's just going to be youthful ignorance that helps him out here. I think his aggression and his length is going to give Makdessi some issues. We've seen John struggle in some of these fights, and this could be one of those controversial finishes where we don't see eye to eye with the judges, but I have to go against Makdessi here, and my prediction is Jesus Pinedo to defeat John Makdessi by possibly split, but I'll take Pinedo by decision. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's heavyweight division as Curtis Razor Blaydes, ranked 4th in the division with a record of 10 wins, 2 losses, and 1 no contest, takes on big, pretty Justin Willis, currently ranked 10th in the division with a record of 8 wins and a single loss. Now, Blaydes is coming off that very tough loss to Francis Ngannou, a fight I correctly predicted, a rematch that saw him get put down, just a 45-second TKO defeat. It ended a 6-fight undefeated streak, which included wins over Alistair Overeem and Mark Hunt, and a lot of people felt Curtis was on the verge of a title shot, including himself. He was talking about it. For Willis, he has won 8 consecutive since a loss in his pro debut. He is 4-0 in the UFC, and he's also coming off a win of the aforementioned Mark Hunt. Now, Blaydes is 3 inches taller. He'll have a 2-inch reach advantage. Both will be near the heavyweight limit, both weighing around 265, 266. Blaydes is the younger man by 4 years. Now, looking at Curtis first, he is a former collegiate wrestler, and a lot of his mixed martial arts success has come as a result of his wrestling game and his ability to transition that skill set to an effective mixed martial artist. He has landed takedowns in 6 of his 8 fights, 33 over those 6 fights. He's got a heavy top game, big ground and pound, and he simply wears guys out. For Willis, he did land a trio of takedowns in his debut, and he landed 1 against Chase Sherman, but he is focused primarily on staying vertical and working his striking. He landed 59 significant strikes against Mark Hunt, 76 against Chase Sherman, and in this fight, he wants to stay vertical, maintain output, and not overextend himself. So the one question we need to ask with Curtis Blaydes is, can he win a matchup where he doesn't secure takedowns? And he has. When he fought Daniel Omielanchuk, he landed 72 significant strikes, no takedowns. It wasn't a great performance, but it was one of those fights where you almost feel like he came out and wanted to showcase that he's not just a one-dimensional wrestler, that he wanted to provide more than what he'd been showing. And that it was a performance that he can build upon, but clearly he's gone back to his ground game and his takedowns, and if that's what's getting him to where it's got him, maybe he needs to stick with that. His striking is still developing. He can be hit. Mark Hunt hurt him on a couple of occasions, and he had to go to his takedowns. Again, he's tough. He took a ton of damage in that debut loss against Francis Ngannou, but again, he got knocked out brutally in that second fight, and you have to wonder. Again, some people call it a controversial stoppage. He was taking a lot of strikeage. He was certainly in some trouble, and you have to wonder in that type of situation, does that make him a little gun shy? Is that an issue for him? Now, for Justin Willis, he isn't going to move forward with big power strikes. He's a southpaw striker, which is going to create some issues for Blaydes. What he's going to rely on is that steady, consistent right jab. It's an effective weapon. He's got good footwork. He moves around well. He moves fairly well for a big man. So does Curtis Blaydes, though. He limits his opponents a chance to set up, and then he makes the most of the offense he lands. Again, Willis isn't the type of guy, for a heavyweight, 4-0 in the UFC with just one knockout. He doesn't offer that overwhelming offense, but again, it's consistent and it is impactful. And that's going to be the key here. I like his lower stature and his physical size. It's going to play well against Blaydes' double leg takedown. That's why I picked Ngannou. I felt that Blaydes is going to try and blast him with a double leg. Ngannou was going to shut him down and go to work. And we did see, essentially him shut the wrestling down in that brief fight and finish him. I think Willis can do the same thing. He's going to shut Blaydes' takedown attempts down, and he's going to force him to engage with him on the feet. Blaydes is going to struggle with the jab of Willis. He's going to eat shots. He's going to throw those wide power punches looking to work his way in, and I guess that's going to be an issue. He's going to eat those shots. Don't be surprised to see Willis come over the top with something powerful and maybe that big left hand against a taller opponent who might not be anticipating it. Look for Blaydes to be a little bit gun-shy, as I said, because he got knocked out. He's probably going to look for takedowns early, and if he doesn't get them, it's to a secondary aspect, which isn't nearly as good, which is his striking. This might not be a pretty win, but Willis will maintain that consistent output, defend takedowns, and minimize Blaydes' offense, and my prediction is Justin Willis to defeat Curtis Blaydes by decision. Finally, in the main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's welterweight division as former title challenger Wonderboy Stephen Thompson, ranked 4th in the division, 14-3-8, takes on Anthony Showtime Pettis, who I believe is currently ranked 8th in the lightweight division, with a current record of 21 wins and 8 losses. Now, this is a really fun fight. It's featuring a pair of fighters that are pretty much out of the title picture at this moment in the respective divisions and are looking to have something exciting and fun, and it's one of those what-if fantasy fights. Obviously, it's not a super high-profile matchup, but still it could be very much a good fight to look forward to. Thompson is coming off that loss against Darren Till, which is a little bit controversial. He is 1-2-1 in his last 4, which included 2 unsuccessful title fights, the loss to Woodley and the previous draw. He had won 7 in a row, including the last man to beat, and not just beat, but knock out the middleweight champion Robert Whittaker. For Pettis, he is 3-6 in his last 9 fights. His wins coming over Jimmy Miller, Charles Oliveira, and Michael Chiesa. And the 6 losses, championship level guys. Again, I'm not a huge Anthony Pettis fan. I've had a good run at talking about and predicting Pettis to lose fights. But you look at the who's who of guys that have beaten him in that stretch. Rafael dos Anjos, former champion. Eddie Alvarez, former champion. Edson Barbosa has been near at the top of the division for a long time. Max Holloway, current champion. Dustin Poirier, on the verge of fighting for a championship, and Tony Ferguson, former interim champion. Wow, that is a fucking murderer's row of killers. Simply put, murderer's row of killers. So very impressive. That makes sense. You get what I'm saying. That's a tough lineup. Now, Pettis has said he's coming up from lightweight. He also fought as low as featherweight because he's not a big lightweight. Thompson is 2 inches taller, over 3-inch reach advantage, and he is actually Pettis is the younger man by 4 years. Now, both guys are incredibly talented strikers. Pettis has a ground game, but he lacks the wrestling to make it a factor here. Thompson by himself is difficult to take down, so unless someone gets knocked down, this fight will most likely be contested on the feet. Some people have talked about Stephen Thompson possibly considering taking it to the mat. He certainly could, but again, Pettis is dangerous off his back, so why risk it, and why give him something that he can't get on his own? Now, statistically, Thompson is the more active striker. He averages almost half a significant strike more per minute, and again, that's about 12 to 13 significant strikes over a 25-minute fight, which can be enough to win you a decision. Pettis also gets hit more, but those numbers are a little bit skewed by the fact that he's been in some ground wars and fought some guys who've got top position. Dustin Poirier and Tony Ferguson had a lot of success as well, landing big shots in the clinch or battering him at times when they're about to finish him, and those numbers do get inflated just a little bit. And that's not Thompson's style. Now, Thompson's 6-3-1 in decisions. not bad. For Pettis, he is 4-5 in decisions, so he's been a bit of a front runner, and that's certainly worth looking at. And when you look at Thompson, 2 of his 3 decision losses, certainly against Darren Till was controversial. Maybe the draw against Woodley was close. The loss against Woodley was close. I think he definitely lost that second one. There's no really denying that. But still, they're close fights, and they're championship-level fights. Pettis' decision defeats have involved giving up takedowns. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Again, that's not Stephen Thompson's style. So we're still left trying to figure out who has the edge and how we get there. Now, one thing Stephen Thompson does very well is he's difficult to reach. He has a variety of long-range weapons. He's a very good counter striker, and it's going to be magnified by his height and by his reach, overall by his length advantage he has. So I would say Stephen Thompson has the edge in volume and work rate and efficiency of offense. They all go to Wonderboy. Now, both guys have a variety of flashy techniques they can draw upon, a lot of high-risk kicking maneuvers that they can go to as well. But who is more dangerous? Who has more power? Wonderboy has 7 wins by knockout, 5 in the UFC. Anthony Pettis has 9 wins by knockout, but just 2 in the UFC, the last one coming back in 2013. One of his biggest weapons, or his kicks, obviously, his body kick, which was very effective in putting down Donald Cerrone. That's one of his most impactful strikes. But Pettis coming up in weight, it should give him an edge in speed against Wonderboy Thompson, who's quick, who's fucking lightning quick, but he's not he's lightning quick with the strikes. He's not a guy who's going to, be super, super fast, with his feet, and he's not going to be hard to track down. He's just very quick with his techniques. But the question is, will Pettis' offense be impactful enough? It wasn't blowing guys out of the water at lightweight, and that's why he went down to 145 pounds. So coming up and facing a guy at 170 pounds, it will further diminish the impactful nature of his offense. For Thompson, he's not going to have that edge in speed, but his power should be magnified against a smaller man. If he lands something on Anthony Pettis, it's going to be significant. Like I said before, I don't anticipate Showtime being able to get his grappling game involved here because he doesn't have the wrestling to take Thompson down. As I've also said, Anthony tends to be a bit of a front runner. He struggles with capable strikers who he can't posterize and Showtime on. Edson Barbosa had a ton of success being the more impactful and effective striker. I think that's going to be a similar issue here. Thompson, he has to pull the trigger. Thompson has to go out and execute. Has to be a little more aggressive than we normally see from him, but he's not going to be hampered by the threat of the takedown against Pettis, and that's going to be a good thing. This should be an extremely fun fight with Thompson landing the more impactful offense, the more active offense, and Pettis is going to have to open himself up to try and get a little more aggressive to try and move forward. He might benefit from not draining himself to make 155 pounds if he was draining himself. But ultimately, I don't think this is a good matchup for him. I think Stephen Thompson is going to be simply just too much. In my prediction, Stephen Thompson to defeat Anthony Pettis by TKO. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 148 at this point. Jeez, it keeps flying by. That's incredible. All of my preliminary predictions will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so please check them out. My bet packs are also available. Again, I had a fantastic UFC 235. We cashed in huge. The event before that I did fairly well, but everything else in 2019 has been kind of shit. I don't anticipate this, with the amount of work I put into it, my track record, I don't anticipate this being, the run for 2019, knock on wood. But we'll see how things play out. Please follow me on Twitter. I think I have 300 subscribers. Again, I try and post things, but again, a lot of times it just doesn't work out for whatever reason. I'm busy or I'm unable to really enjoy the fights because I'm doing so much work with this massive schedule. I believe next event is the last in 9 consecutive weekends, and we get a bit of a break, which I'm looking forward to because, again, this is just a hobby, folks. I do not do this. I'm literally sitting in my classroom right now on my break recording this, so I do not do this as my full-time job. And I have I have a big family as well, so it makes things incredibly difficult at times. I have a lot of irons in the fire, if you will. But on that note, enough talking about me. We've got lots to do, including prelim predictions to break down and a bet pack to compose. I will talk to you soon, guys. Take care.